A small fat penguin stands in the snow of the Ice Kingdom, blinking up at a wizard who calls him Daddy's little fatty. While somewhere underneath that blank black stare sleeps a thing that once tried to eat a comet and rule the solar system. I know how that sounds, but that little penguin, the one waddling after the Ice King, fetching his potions, the one you'd swear is just a sweet background gag, is hiding the biggest secret in all of Oo. Tonight we are going to follow Gunter all the way down, from the snow to the stars, and find out what is really sleeping behind those eyes. So settle in, get comfortable, let your shoulders drop. If you want more quiet nights like this, 1. The subscribe button keeps them coming. Welcome to Pine Hat. Let's start where everyone else stops, with the penguin nobody bothered to look at twice. I want to start you off somewhere soft and cold, with a fat little penguin standing in the snow. Because nobody who meets Gunter for the first time has any idea what they're actually looking at. Picture it slowly. There's snow, the kind of pale, endless snow that the Ice Kingdom is buried under, blue at the edges, quiet in a way that feels almost padded, like the whole place has been wrapped in cotton. And standing in that snow is a small round penguin. Not a tall, proud, regal sort of penguin, a short one. A soft one, the kind of shape you'd draw if a child asked you to draw something harmless. Black on the back, white on the front, 2 little flippers that don't really do much, and a stare. That stare is the thing you'll remember. Big and black and completely empty, like 2 drops of ink, blinking up at the world without a single thought you could name behind them. And looming over this penguin is a wizard, a tall, blue-skinned old man in a tattered robe with a long white beard and a crown of gold and gemstones jammed onto his head. The Ice King, the loneliest villain in all of O, though we're not getting into all of that tonight. He looks down at the little penguin, and he calls him Daddy's little fatty. Daddy's little fatty. Say it out loud sometime and listen to how strange it is. It's the sort of thing you'd coo at a pet you adored, a cat curled on your lap, a dog who'd grown a little too round on table scraps. There's no menace in it at all. It's gentle. It's almost embarrassing in how gentle it is. The Ice King says it the way a parent says something soft over a crib, and the penguin just blinks back up at him, wet and shapeless and silent, and waddles a little closer. That's it. That's the first thing the show wants you to see. A small fat penguin, a lonely wizard, the snow, and a ridiculous tender little pet name. Hold that picture, because everything we do tonight pushes against it. So let me tell you about the Gunter that everyone meets first. The surface one. The one you'd describe to a friend if they'd never seen the show. Out of all the penguins shuffling around the Ice Kingdom, and there are a lot of them, little black and white shapes everywhere you look, Gunter is the favorite. He's the chosen one, if you can call it that. The Ice King keeps Gunter close, treats him as a personal servant, sends him to fetch things, to carry things, to be near him. And here's the part that quietly matters. The other penguins aren't servants. The other penguins are slaves. The show is pretty plain about that. The Ice King has a whole staff of these birds doing his bidding, and they're not there by choice. But Gunter, somehow, is different. Gunter is the one he keeps by his side. Gunter is the one he talks to. Gunter is the one creature in that frozen palace that the Ice King treats with something that looks, if you squint, a little bit like love. That's the relationship in its simplest form, a friendless old man and the one pet he adores. Everyone else is furniture or labor. Gunter is family, or at least the Ice King has decided that he is, which honestly might be the more important thing. Now, the texture of that, the day-to-day of being Gunter, because I don't want to just list you a row of facts like I'm reading off a card. I want you to feel how cozy and dumb and small it all is, at first. Gunter breaks bottles. That's a thing he does. You'll catch him standing near some shelf of the Ice King's potions and curiosities, and there's this little moment where the bottle is there, and then with one slow, deliberate sweep of a flipper, the bottle is not there anymore. It's on the floor, it's in pieces, and Gunter just looks at you. No guilt, no glee even. Just that blank black stare and the soft crash still ringing out. He breaks things the way water finds its way downhill, like it's simply what's meant to happen. Gunter eats socks. Whole socks swallowed down without a second thought, the way you or I might eat a grape. There's something so pleasingly stupid about it. A penguin eating a sock. You can't argue with it, you can't reason with it, it's just true. And you never see him hunting for them, exactly. The socks just seem to find their way to him, or he to them, and then they're gone. And he's blinking at you again like nothing happened, like the idea of a sock has already left his head entirely. There's no chewing it over, there's no decision. A penguin and a sock occupy the same small patch of snow, and then there's only the penguin. Gunter plays keyboard, sits there, little flippers on the keys, and makes music. or makes noise, depending on the day and how generous you're feeling. And I'll be honest, this is the one that gets me every time, because there's something so cozy about a fat penguin hunched over a keyboard at the end of the world, plinking out a tune that nobody asked for. Anyway, back to it. And through all of it, the bottles and the socks and the keyboard, there's the devotion. Gunter follows the Ice King around with this total, blank, bottomless loyalty. Wherever the wizard goes, the penguin goes. Whatever the wizard wants, the penguin is somewhere nearby being part of it. There's no resentment in him, no scheming you can see, no inner life you could point to. He's just there, soft and round and present, blinking up at his daddy, eating the occasional sock, knocking the occasional bottle to the floor. It's the most harmless picture you could possibly paint. A penguin with nothing in his head but devotion and the next thing to break. And here's a detail I love, because it sneaks past you the first 100 times you see it. The name itself doesn't mean anything. Listen, the Ice King doesn't just call this one penguin Gunter, he calls all of them Gunter. Every penguin in the kingdom, they're all Gunter to him, or some near miss of it. He'll say Gunter, he'll say Gunter, he'll bend a vowel and make it Gunter, Gunder, Gunny, Gunther. He just sort of reaches into the same small bag of sounds and pulls one out and points it at whichever bird is nearest. And that bird becomes Gunter for as long as he's looking at it. The name slides off all of them and sticks to none of them. And nobody corrects him, because of course nobody does. The penguins can't. They just turn their blank little faces toward whichever sound he's making and accept it. You could be Gunny one moment and Gunter the next and Gunder after that, and it wouldn't matter, because there's no you underneath it to insist otherwise. The name lands wherever it lands, and the bird wears it for a heartbeat and then it moves on to the next one. Think about what that does to the word. If everyone is Gunter, then Gunter isn't really a name at all. It's a noise. It's the sound a lonely man makes when he wants to address the warm shapes around him and doesn't have or doesn't need a way to tell them apart. It's closer to a sigh than a name. Gunter, Gunter, Gunny. Just the same soft syllable, rolled out over and over into a room full of identical birds. Read one way, that's just a joke. And a good one, the kind of repeating gag the show was so fond of. But read it a little slower and the show implies something quieter and sadder underneath. Giving every penguin the same name is the Ice King erasing them, flattening a whole crowd of living creatures down into one interchangeable shape, one repeated sound. No individuals, no difference between this bird and that bird. All of them collapsed into Gunter. And what this suggests, sitting here in the dark with the whole rest of the story ahead of us, is a small comic rehearsal of something far darker the show will eventually turn on the Ice King himself. Because the erasing of who someone is, the loss of a name, the flattening of a person down into something simpler and emptier, that's going to come back. It's going to come back and it's going to hurt. But for now, it's played for a laugh, this lonely man calling every bird the same name. And we laugh and we move on. There's a reading of the pet name too, the daddy's little fatty of it all, that I can't shake once I've noticed it. Because frame it the way the show seems to want, and the whole relationship is a one-sided fatherhood. The Ice King has decided this penguin is his child. He's invented a family out of birds. He's standing in the snow at the end of the world, friendless, his mind frayed in ways we won't get into yet. And he's looked at a fat little animal that eats socks and cannot speak, and probably cannot love him back in any way he'd recognize, and he has called it his, Daddy's little fatty. It's tender and it's heartbreaking in the same breath. A man so alone that he's built fatherhood out of the only one thing that'll stand near him. I told you this show does that. It hands you a joke and there's grief folded up inside it. Now, I want to set something down very gently because it's the whole reason we're here tonight. This penguin, this exact soft, round, sock-eating, bottle-breaking, blank-eyed penguin. This is the creature we're going to spend the entire night with. And by the time we reach the end, I'm going to try to convince you, and the show is going to try to convince you that he might be the single most dangerous thing in the entire world. I know. Look at him. He's a fat little bird in the snow. He plays a keyboard. He has no expression at all. There is nothing about him, nothing you could see on the surface, that says danger. That's not an accident. That's the trick. Hold on to that feeling, the how could it possibly be him feeling, because we're going to need it later. We're going to need it badly. Every time the story turns and shows you a little more, I want you to feel that old certainty tug at you. The one that says, no, not him, not the penguin, look at him, he's harmless. That tug is the show working exactly as designed. Keep it. We'll come back for it. And that, I think, is the cleverest thing about how Gunter gets introduced to us in the first place. We meet him as background comedy. He's the gag in the corner. He's the penguin you don't look at twice, the one fetching potions while the real story happens to the people with faces and names and lines to say. He's set dressing. He's a bit, and the show does that on purpose, the way I read it, so that the eventual reveal lands like a betrayal, not of any character, but of us, of our own assumptions. We were the ones who decided he didn't matter. We were the ones who looked at the small harmless thing and filed it under harmless and never checked again. So when the floor finally drops out, it drops out under our certainty, and that's a much longer fall. He's been on screen since almost the very beginning, by the way, all the way back at the start, when this whole thing was just a strange little show that Pendleton Ward made for Cartoon Network and that ran from 2010 to 2018. Gunter's right there in the opening, the scene that plays during the theme song, waddling through the world with everyone else. Easy to miss, easy to love, easy to underestimate. He was there the whole time. We just weren't looking. I'll give you one thread to hold, and I want to be careful and honest about it because it's a fan idea and not something the show ever actually confirms. Some fans have theorized that all those little behaviors, the bottle breaking, the sock eating, the keyboard playing, aren't really penguin antics at all, that they're leakage. That somewhere down underneath that blank stare, there's an old, vast, suppressed memory pressing up against the surface, and these strange repeating compulsions are it bleeding through. The way a dream leads you with a feeling in the morning you can't explain. That the breaking and the swallowing and the tuneless music are the cracks where something enormous is quietly leaking out. Nothing official confirms this. The show never once says it. It might be nothing. It might just be a penguin being a penguin. But it's the kind of idea that, once it's in your head, makes you watch those little gags differently. Makes you lean in a bit closer to the blank black eyes and wonder what's actually looking back. And here's where I tip the first real card of the night, because I can't hold it any longer. Somewhere out there in the long, strange sprawl of this story, a demon, an actual demon, a creature whose entire existence is built around fear and cruelty and the dark old powers of the world, once looked at this exact penguin. This one, the fat one, the one in the snow, the one called Daddy's Little Fatty, the one who eats socks. A demon looked at Gunter, and the demon was afraid. Sit with that for a second, because it doesn't make any sense, and it isn't supposed to yet. Everything I've shown you tonight says this penguin is the most harmless thing alive. Soft, silent, devoted, dumb in the kindest way, the pet of a lonely old man at the end of the world. And something whose whole nature is to be frightening took one look at him and felt the bottom drop out of its own stomach. That gap between the bird we've been laughing at and the terror in the eyes of a demon is the whole story. That gap is where we're going. So let's go and stand in that fear for a while and find out what the demon saw when it looked at a penguin and met the most evil thing it had ever known. So let me give you the moment that made me want to tell you this whole story in the first place. It's the moment a demon walked into a room full of monsters and was frightened of the penguin. Here is the scene. In the episode called It Came from the Nightosphere, the floor of Ooh cracks open and out comes Hunts in a Badir. He is the Lord of the Nightosphere, he is Marceline's own father, and he is a being who feeds on souls the way you and I breathe air. This is not a small character. This is someone who has spent what might as well be forever tasting the insides of every living thing he passes, sorting them, weighing them, deciding what's worth devouring. He is, in a very real sense, a connoisseur of evil. He has standards, and he walks into a room, and he scans it the way you'd scan a buffet you've eaten at 1,000 times. And his eye lands on something. Not a wizard, not a vampire, not any of the monstrous things you'd expect. It lands on the penguin, and he says that this little creature has by far the most evil thing he's encountered. By far, sit with those two words for a second, because they're doing a tremendous amount of work. He doesn't say one of the most evil. He doesn't hedge. A creature who eats souls for a living looks across a crowded room and picks out the soft, round bird in the corner as the single worst thing he has ever come across. And there's no contest. It isn't close. Think about how much that demon has seen. Think about the sheer back catalog of horror a soul eater accumulates over an existence that has no real end to it. Whole kingdoms of the wicked have passed under his nose. And out of all of it, the gold medal goes to a penguin. And here's the thing that gets me. In the moment, it plays almost like a joke, because Gunter is just standing there, blank. That flat black stare, those little flippers, that quiet wank, while a literal demon recoils from him like he stepped too close to a furnace. There's no menace in the penguin's face. There's nothing in the penguin's face at all, which is sort of the whole point. The show lets you laugh. It frames it like a gag, a throwaway, the kind of background absurdity Adventure Time tosses off 100 times a season and never explains. Ha! The penguin's secretly evil. Isn't that random? Moving on? Except it isn't random, and it doesn't move on. Not really, because that line is a promise. I want you to hear it that way. as a promise the show is quietly making to you in the middle of an episode that's supposedly about something else entirely. A creature who can read souls just told us, out loud, that the most harmless-looking thing in the entire world is hiding the most evil thing he has ever touched. The show says it once, lightly, almost under its breath, and then it walks away and lets you forget. But it said it. And everything we're going to do tonight, every strange turn this story takes from here, is us slowly walking back to that one sentence and earning the answer to it. That's the deal I'm making with you. We've got a few hours, you and me, and we're going to spend them figuring out exactly what that demon saw. Not in one big reveal, because the show doesn't work like that, but slowly, the way you dig something very old out of very deep snow, a little at a time, until the joke stops being a joke and starts being the saddest thing in Ooh. Now, read this way, Hunson Abadir is something rare in storytelling. The show implies he functions as a kind of cosmic lie detector. He doesn't see the body, he sees the soul underneath the body, the actual moral weight of a thing, stripped of its skin and its waddle and its cute little potion fetching. So when he looks at Gunter, he isn't fooled the way the rest of Ooh is fooled. He's the first character in the whole series to tell the audience the truth about this penguin, and he does it years before the show is ready to explain what that truth even means. We later come to understand that what he sensed was Gunter's true identity, a being called Orgelorg, though none of that is on the table yet. Not for us, not for anyone in that room. He just feels it. The research around the show suggests he may have sensed Gunter's true cosmic nature long before any of it was spelled out. The demon knows. The demon always knew. He just couldn't tell you why, and neither could the writers, not yet. And if you'll let me sit on that for a moment, because this is the part I find genuinely beautiful. The horror of the scene isn't the evil, it's the gap. It's the distance between what Hunson sees and what Gunter is. Because Gunter has no idea, none. The penguin standing in that room is not putting on an act. There's no cunning behind the blank stare, no villain biding his time, no quiet little smile when nobody's looking. Gunter genuinely does not know there's anything inside him at all. He's thinking about, I don't know, socks, a shiny bottle he'd like to break. The Ice King has no idea either, and the Ice King is the one who lives with him, feeds him, dotes on him, calls him his little buddy. The person closest to this creature in all the world hasn't the faintest clue what's curled up asleep beneath the feathers. And for years, here's the lovely cruel part, the audience had no idea too. We watched Gunter waddle through episode after episode as comic relief, the troublemaker, the gremlin who wrecks the Ice King stuff, and we laughed, and we never once suspected. We were exactly as blind as everyone in that room. The demon was the only one in on it, and he wasn't telling. If this is the kind of slow unraveling you like, the quiet pull of a story that hides its biggest truth in plain sight, subscribing genuinely helps me keep making these, and I'm grateful to everyone who does. Okay, back to the penguin. So here's where the whole question of this story starts to shift. Under our feet, when you first hear it, the obvious question is Gunter evil? Is the penguin secretly a bad guy? And honestly, that's the boring version of the question, and I think the show knows it. Because evil the way we usually mean it needs a knower. It needs intent. It needs somebody home behind the eyes choosing the bad thing on purpose. And there is nobody home. Not in the way that word requires. So the real question, the one we're actually going to chase tonight, is Gunter evil? It's something stranger and a lot harder to shake. What is sleeping inside something that looks this harmless? What gets to live in a body this soft, this silly, this incapable of hurting anyone? And how did it get there? And what happens on the day it wakes up? Because that's the trick the show is pulling. And read this way, it's both the central joke and the central tragedy of the whole character. The funniest possible place to hide the most evil soul in the cosmos is inside the most harmless body you can imagine. That's comedy. A penguin. Of course it's a penguin. But flip it over and hold it up to the light and it stops being funny. Because what you're actually looking at is evil and innocence wearing the exact same skin, sharing one little round body and neither of them knowing the other one is there. The monster doesn't know it's wearing a penguin. The penguin doesn't know it's housing a monster. They're strangers living in the same house, and the house can't tell. And what that suggests, and I'll flag this clearly as a reading, my reading, is that the thing pulling at us in this scene was never the evil at all. It's the not knowing, the grief of it almost. Picture how a normal villain works. A normal villain chooses. He weighs the cruel thing against the kind thing, and he reaches for the cruel one, and because he chose, we get to be angry at him. We get to hold him responsible. The moral math works out clean. Gunter gets none of that. Gunter can't be guilty of anything because guilt needs a choice, and Gunter never made one. He can't know what he is. He's just carrying it the way you might carry something in your blood you'll never feel. And that takes all the usual moral weight of a villain and quietly removes it, and what's left where the anger should be isn't anger. It's closer to sorrow. You can't be furious at the Penguin. You can only feel a little sad for him, and maybe a little afraid on his behalf. I should be fair and tell you the show doesn't tie this off neatly, and fans have gone back and forth on it for years. There's a real debate over what was actually happening in that room. Was Hudson Avadir truly perceiving Gunter's nature, reading him clean and deliberate, the cosmic lie detector doing exactly what it does? Or did he just stumble onto it sideways, brush up against something enormous by accident, and flinch before he understood what it was? Nothing official settles it, and the show leaves the door open on purpose. I lean toward deliberate myself because it's the better story, but I'd be lying if I told you that was confirmed. It isn't. It's just a thing some of us choose to believe because the alternative is less satisfying. But whichever way you land on that, the verdict itself stands, and it hangs over everything that comes next. The most evil thing a Soul Eater ever met is a sock-stealing penguin who will never not once know it. That's the shape of the mystery. And the maddening, wonderful thing is that the show won't hand you the answer all at once. It feeds it to you in pieces, scattered across years, hidden inside episodes that look like they're about something else. And one of the very first pieces is almost too small to notice, because it isn't even about one penguin. It's about a whole army of them and the strange little hunger they share when they all start moving as one. So hold that picture in your head, the demon shaking, the thing it saw when it looked too closely at a penguin. Then let it go for a while. Because here's the strange part, the part that makes Gunter Gunter. For a long time, the show never asked us to be afraid of him. For years and years, it let us laugh at him. So let me walk you back down out of the dark. Now that you're hooked, now that you know what's sleeping under there. And let me show you the seasons when Gunter was just a troublemaker. The clumsy one, the one who knocked things over. And then, very slowly, I want to show you the exact moments where the joke starts to curdle, where the laugh catches a little in your throat, where you stop and think, wait, what did I just watch? Because that's the trick of it. The show hides the most enormous thing in OO inside the smallest, dumbest gags it can find. And if you weren't looking, you'd miss it completely. Let's go back to the early run. Gunter, in those years, is basically the Ice King's pet, and the show treats him exactly like a pet. He waddles around the ice castle, he eats things he shouldn't, he breaks bottles, he gets blamed. He's a little black and white shape in the corner of the frame, and most of the time you're not even supposed to be looking at him, you're supposed to be looking at the wizard losing his mind in the foreground. Gunter is set dressing. Gunter is texture. He's the thing that makes the lonely ice castle feel a little less empty, a little more lived in. A man and his penguin, rattling around a frozen palace at the top of the world. And picture that place for a second, because the show really does sell it as cold and empty. Long blue halls, wind, snow that never stops. A wizard who steals princesses because he doesn't understand any other way to not be alone, and who keeps getting left over and over, because of course he does. And in all that white silence, there's this one little waddling shape that never leaves, doesn't run away, doesn't get scared off, just stays, eats the socks, knocks over the potions, says wank. There's something almost unbearably gentle about that when you slow down and really look at it. The loneliest man in OO, and the one creature that won't abandon him, is a penguin who can't even tell him why it's there. And honestly, that framing matters more than it looks. Keep it in the back of your mind as we go, because I think the real story of these early episodes isn't Gunter at all. Read it this way and it clicks into place. The through line here is the Ice King's loneliness. Gunter is just the screen that loneliness gets projected onto. The wizard needs something to love, something to talk to, something to blame, something to fetch his slippers and absorb his madness. And Gunter is right there, blinking, saying wink, asking nothing, explaining nothing. So the Ice King pours all of it into this little penguin. Affection, irritation, need. And Gunter just takes it. Quietly, the way a wall takes a shadow. Alright, let's actually look at some of these moments because they're small, and small is the whole point. There's an episode called Still, and in Still, the Ice King has used a potion to freeze Finn and Jake in place, frozen in place. And he's working with potions to keep them that way. It's a tense little setup. The heroes stuck, the wizard puttering around them. And in the middle of all that, there's Gunter, trying to interfere with the potions, fumbling at them, clumsily getting into things he shouldn't be getting into. And here's what I love, and also what unsettles me a little the more I sit with it. The show never tells you why. Is Gunter trying to help Finn and Jake? Is he trying to ruin the Ice King's plan on purpose? Or is he just a penguin who saw some interesting bottles and wanted to mess with them, the way a cat knocks a glass off a table for no reason at all? You genuinely can't tell. His loyalty is a complete blank. There's sabotage happening, small clumsy sabotage, and absolutely no way to read the intent behind it. And I want to be really honest with you about that right at the start, because I'm going to keep coming back to it tonight. The show does this on purpose. It refuses to tell us what's going on inside him. We watch the hands fumble at the potions, and we never get the eyes behind it. That uncertainty isn't a gap in the writing. It is the writing. Okay, lighter one. There's an episode, 5 short Graybles, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A handful of tiny, disconnected stories. And in the Ice King's little slice of it, there's this perfect dumb beat where he smells something awful, this stench in the air, and he turns and blames it on Gunter. On Gunter's, let's say, penguin gas. That's the whole joke. The wizard wrinkling his nose at his penguin. It's a background gag. It's nothing. It lasts a few seconds and it's gone. Pause for a second, though. I laughed the first time, too. It's a fart joke about a penguin. I'm not made of stone. But notice what the show is quietly doing even here, in the dumbest possible moment. It's keeping Gunter pressed right up against the Ice King's loneliness. Even when the only purpose Gunter serves in a scene is to get blamed for a smell, he's still there, still in the frame, still the one the wizard turns to, talks to, accuses. The most disposable gag in the world, and the show still uses it to say, these two are never apart. The penguin is always within arm's reach. That's not an accident either. And then you get an episode like Holly Jolly Secrets, and the temperature changes. This is the one where Finn and Jake find the Ice King's video diary and starts decoding it, playing it back, and we start seeing the Ice King the way he sees himself when he thinks no one is watching. It's one of those Adventure Time episodes that starts as a goof and then quietly opens a trapdoor under you, because the Ice King's buried humanity starts leaking out through these tapes. The man he used to be, somewhere under the blue skin and the crown, starts bleeding through the cracks. And it's tender, and it's sad, and it's a little unbearable in the way the best of the show is. And Gunter is there for it. Of course, Gunter is there for it. And at some point, in the middle of all that aching loneliness, the Ice King tells Gunter that he loves them. Just like that. He says he loves his penguin, no big swell of music, no grand declaration. Just a sad man and his penguin and 3 small words in a frozen room. Sit with that for a second. Let it land slow. Let the room go quiet around it the way it does in the episode. Because there are 2 ways to hold it, and I don't think you ever have to choose. One way, the simple way, it's a lonely, broken man telling the only creature who'll sit still long enough that he loves it. And it's heartbreaking exactly because Gunter can't or won't say anything back. That blank little stare. Wink. The other way, the way that gives me a chill the longer this video goes, is that we, the audience, know something the Ice King doesn't. We know there might be something underneath that penguin that does not love anything, that has never loved anything, that sees love the way a tide sees a sandcastle. And the wizard is saying I love you straight into that, straight into the dark. Quick aside, fans have gone back and forth on this for years. And I want to flag it honestly. Nobody official has confirmed whether Gunter's affection for the Ice King is real, whether there's genuine warmth in there, or whether it's just a leftover habit from something older and colder wearing a penguin's body. The show doesn't settle it. People have theorized both ways. So when I say it gives me a chill, that's me reading into a silence the writers chose to leave silent. Okay, now we get to the big one. The episode that, looking back, I think is the first real crack in the surface. Reign of Gunters. Here's what happens. The Ice King owns a thing called the demonic wishing eye. It's his, and Gunter takes it, without the Ice King's knowledge. The penguin gets hold of this object of real power, this wishing eye, and what does he do with it? He makes copies of himself. He clones himself into an army of Gunters, and he sets out to take over Ooo. And I need you to hear how that lands. Because on the surface, it's pure comedy. It's penguins everywhere. It's chaos. It's the show doing what the show does, taking something absurd and running it straight off a cliff for laughs. A penguin uprising, a waddling little coup. It's funny, but slow down with me. Strip the candy color off it for 1 second and look at what's actually on the screen. The single most harmless creature in this entire world gets its flippers on real power, and the very first thing it reaches for is everything. Not a snack, not a nap, not more bottles to break, the whole world. Dominion. And the method, this is the part that snags on something in the back of my mind. The method is to fill the world with copies of himself, to make more Gunter, to expand, to cover everything in versions of one appetite. That's not pet behavior. Read it that way just for a moment and tell me it doesn't feel like the show is auditioning Gunter for villainy. Quietly. Out of the corner of its eye, it lets this little creature reach for the entire world, lets you feel the size of what's underneath for one held breath. And then, before you can take it seriously, before you can really sit in the dread of it, it snaps the whole thing back into comedy and waddles off. The crack opens, you catch a glimpse of what's down there, and the floorboard slides shut again. And you laugh, because what else are you going to do? I don't want to over-explain this because I think the show is trusting you to feel it rather than be told. So I'll just lay the two things side by side and step back. A pet that, given a single moment of real power, immediately tries to consume the world by multiplying itself across it. Hold that. Just hold it. We'll come back to it, and when we do, I don't think you'll be laughing. Because here's the thing I keep circling. The drive and reign of Gunters. The appetite to take everything and to do it by spreading copies of yourself outward until there's nothing left that isn't you, that rhymes. It rhymes uncomfortably with something we are going to learn later about what this creature really is, and what it really wanted back before it ever wore feathers. To consume, to expand, to rule. I'm not going to spell out the connection yet. I just want you to notice the shape of it now, so that when the real thing arrives, you remember you already saw its silhouette in a comedy episode about a penguin with too many friends. And to be fair, and I really do mean fair, fans have absolutely run with this. There's a popular reading out there that the cloning power grab in Reign of Gunters isn't random penguin chaos at all, that it's the first time the older, hungrier thing inside Gunter surfaces and shows its hand, reaching for dominion the only way it can while trapped in a soft little body. It's a great theory. It feels right, but I have to be straight with you. The show never confirms it. Nothing official says that's what that episode is. It might just be a penguin and a magic eye in a writer's room having fun. That's the honest answer, and I'd rather give you the honest answer than a clean one. And that right there is the whole problem of Gunter in a single episode. We watch him reach for the world, and the show simply will not tell us whether we're looking at mischief or memory. Whether this is a bored pet making trouble, or whether something ancient just woke up for a second, stretched, remembered what it used to be, and tried for the old prize through brand new eyes. The writers leave the door shut, and I'll say that plainly because I'd be lying to you if I pretended otherwise. I don't know which it is. Nobody watching does. The not knowing is the point. The same way it was and still the same way it is when the Ice King says I love you to a blank black stare. So we've got our crack now. We've seen the surface curdle just enough to know there's something under it. And the question that's been humming under all of this, the comet, the eating, the wanting to rule the solar system, the thing the demon was so afraid of, that question has a name. And it's time we finally said it out loud. The name of what's really sleeping behind those eyes. Orgolorg, the breaker of worlds. Now I have to take you all the way back, past past the Ice Kingdom, past the snow and the wizard and the little fat penguin blinking up at him, past all of it. I need you to come with me back to a time before any of this, before the candy and the kingdoms and the magic. Back to when the universe itself was younger, when the solar system was a different and a wilder place, and this penguin, this exact penguin, was not a penguin at all. He was something closer to a god. And the way the show finally tells you this, the way it finally cracks the whole thing open, is so strange and so quiet and so out of nowhere that I want to walk you through it slowly. Because the first time you see it, it genuinely does not feel real. It starts with a head injury. That's it. That's how the biggest secret in the entire world gets shaken loose. Not a spell, not a prophecy, not some grand magical unveiling with trumpets and light. A bonk. A knock to the head. In the episode that's actually named after the thing buried inside him, the episode called Orgolorg, Gunter takes a blow to the skull, and something deep down in there comes unstuck. Memories start surfacing. The penguin, who has never had a single nameable thought behind those big black eyes, suddenly starts to remember who he used to be. And who he used to be is the part you won't believe. I want to sit on that mechanism for a second because it matters more than it looks. A head injury. The brain gets jostled, and the past comes pouring back up through the cracks. Read this way. The show is telling you something a little bit chilling. It's telling you that the memories were never gone. They were in there the whole time, the whole way, every sock he ever ate, every bottle he ever knocked to the floor, locked up tight behind the bone. And the thing keeping that vast old self pressed down, the thing holding the lid on, was the head itself. The brain was the prison. It took a crack in the wall to let any light back in. Hold on to that idea, the brain as the cell, because it's going to come back later in the same episode in a way I find honestly a little hard to shake. So, let me tell you who he was. And I want to tell it to you the way the show tells it, which is as a myth, not a history, a myth. The kind of story you'd hear told around a fire, half remembered, enormous. The name's strange in your mouth. Once, in an age before this one, before the time we know, there was a creature called Orgalorg. And Orgalorg was not a wizard or a king or a monster the way you'd picture a monster. Orgalorg was a primordial cosmic entity, a thing from the deep early dark of the universe. And Orgalorg had a title the way the truly enormous things in old stories always have a title, and the title was the Breaker of Worlds. Say that to yourself slowly. The Breaker of Worlds, not the breaker of a town, not the breaker of a kingdom. Worlds, plural. And this creature, this Breaker of Worlds, ruled the solar system. The whole thing. The planets, the dark between the planets, all of it, under the rule of one ancient and terrible thing that drifted through the early dark of space, doing exactly what its name said it did. I need you to really feel the size of that, because the whole tragedy of tonight lives in the size of it. We're not talking about something a little bigger than the Ice King. We're talking about something on the scale of the cosmos itself, a ruler of worlds. And I want you to keep right beside that picture in your head, the other picture, the little round penguin in the snow, the one who eats socks. Because those two things, the cosmic tyrant and the sock-eating pet, are the same creature. They are the same creature. And we'll get to how, but I want the impossibility of it to sit on you for a while first, the way it sat on me. Now, into this picture comes the comet. The Adventure Time universe has this recurring idea of a comet, a great cosmic body that arrives across enormous spans of time. And the one that matters to our story is the Catalyst Comet, a comet of change. A comet that, when it arrives, carries the power to remake things, to turn one thing into another, an object of immense and transformative force. And when this comet appeared in the sky of that ancient age, Orgalorg, the Breaker of Worlds, did exactly what a thing called the Breaker of Worlds would do. It reached for it. It moved to absorb the comet, to take that transformative power into itself, to swallow the catalyst whole and become something even greater than it already was. The most powerful thing in the solar system, reaching out to make itself the most powerful thing there could ever be. And that reach, that grasp, is the moment everything turns, because somebody decided to stop it. Here's where the myth gets gloriously, beautifully strange, and I love it for being strange. So stay with me. The one who moves against Orgalorg is a king, and the king is Abraham Lincoln. Yes, that Abraham Lincoln, the name you know except in this story, he is the King of Mars. The King of Mars. I'm not going to pretend that isn't a wonderful thing to have to say out loud at 2 in the morning. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, looks out at this primordial world breaker reaching to swallow a comet of pure transformative power, and he decides that cannot be allowed to happen. So he sends a champion. And the champion is Grob Gob Glob Grod. Now, if that name sounds like 4 names crammed into one, that's because in a sense it is. But tonight, all you need to hold is that Grob Gob Glob Grod is the being sent to bring Orgalorg down. And the weapon, oh the weapon. The weapon is the flaming sword of Grob Gob Glob Grod, a burning blade, sent by the King of Mars, carried by his champion, swung at a god. I have to stop for just a second, because I can hear how this sounds. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, sends a 4-named space deity with a flaming sword to strike down a cosmic penguin tyrant who's trying to eat a comet. If you read that off a page cold, you'd laugh, and honestly you should. That's the candy-colored surface this show always wears. But underneath the silliness, the shape of the thing is pure old myth. A king, a champion, a blade of fire, a monster reaching for forbidden power and getting struck down for the reaching. People have been telling that exact story since people could talk. The show just dressed it in the daffiest costume it could find. Anyway, the sword falls, the flaming sword of Grob Gob Glob Grod comes down on the Breaker of Worlds, and Orgalorg is struck, cast down. And here is the fall, and I want to slow all the way down for the fall, because the fall is the heart of the whole night. Orgalorg, struck from the sky, falls to Earth, and Earth does something to it. This is the part I find genuinely strange and genuinely sad in equal measure. When this cosmic giant, this ruler of worlds, hits our planet, the Earth's gravity gets hold of it, and the gravity compresses it, crushes it down, folds this enormous primordial thing in on itself, smaller and smaller, squeezing out the scale and the power and the terror, condensing all of that vastness down, 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 into a smaller and far more powerless form. And the form it settles into, the shape this world-breaking god gets pressed into by the simple weight of our world's gravity, is a penguin. A penguin. A small, round, soft, blank-eyed penguin. Gunter. I told you wouldn't believe it. The single most powerful thing in the solar system, the Breaker of Worlds, did not die when the flaming sword struck it. It fell, and it landed, and our planet's own gravity quietly folded it up into a creature small enough to sit in your lap. And I want to be careful and honest here, the way I always try to be with you, because the exact mechanics of that compression are something the show shows you visually, but doesn't really explain in words. You see the squeezing, you see the giant become the small thing. The how of it, the physics of it, the show leaves sparse on purpose. So I'm describing what's on screen and not pretending to know the engineering of it, because there isn't any engineering of it to know. It's myth. It's an image. A god falls and the earth makes it small. That's the truth the show hands you, and I think the image is doing the work that an explanation would only ruin. But let me tell you the reading of that image, because once it clicked for me, I couldn't watch this penguin the same way again. Read this way: the gravity crushing a god down into a penguin is the purest metaphor this whole show ever reached for. Think about what it actually is. It's power and identity, an enormous, dangerous, godlike self being compressed down small enough to survive. Not killed, compressed, squeezed down into something that can keep existing, but only by becoming tiny, only by becoming harmless, only by becoming so small that all the vastness has to be packed away somewhere it can't get out. What this suggests to me is the show's clearest picture of repression, the actual psychological thing, the self that's too big and too frightening to live with, so it gets crushed down and folded away and made small enough to carry. And the cost of carrying it, the cost of surviving it, is that you forget it was ever there at all. Because that's the other half of the fall, the forgetting, the blow, the crash, the compression. All of it caused amnesia. Orgalorg fell to Earth and lost itself. The memories, the identity, the title, the whole cosmic history, all of it sealed away behind that new small skull. And what was left, this penguin with nothing in its head, this empty soft thing, then wandered. It wandered the Earth for a very long time. The show puts it as millennia, thousands upon thousands of years. This powerless amnesiac creature drifting across the world with no idea what it was, no idea what it had been, no idea that it had ever been anything at all. And I'm going to keep that span deliberately vague, because the show keeps it vague. It's a long time. It's an inhuman length of time. A penguin wandering an empty world for an age, carrying a god inside it and not knowing. Until eventually, somewhere in all that drifting, a lonely blue wizard found it and took it in. And that's where our two stories finally touch. The penguin that fell from the stars and the wizard who needed something to love. Daddy's little fatty. The Ice King reached down into the snow and picked up the most dangerous thing in the solar system and decided it was his pet. And neither of them had the faintest idea. There's something almost unbearably tender in that when you hold the whole picture at once. Two enormous, ruined, forgotten things, finding each other in the snow and comforting each other, and not one of them knowing what the other had lost. I want to take a small breath here with you, because I know we just covered a lot of cosmos very fast, and if you're lying there in the dark letting this wash over you, that's exactly right. If these slow trips out to the edge of a story are the kind of thing that help you wind down at night, following the subscribe button means more of them find their way to you. And that genuinely means a lot to me. Okay, let me bring it back down to ooh, because there's a loop I opened earlier tonight that I finally get to close. The demon. Remember the demon? Earlier I told you that somewhere in this story, a demon, an actual demon, a creature built out of fear and cruelty and the old dark powers of the world, once looked at this exact penguin and felt afraid. And I told you it didn't make sense yet and that it wasn't supposed to. Well, now it makes sense. Now you can see what the demon was actually looking at. The demon wasn't afraid of a penguin. Of course it wasn't. No demon in its right mind is frightened of a fat bird that eats socks. The demon was afraid because a demon of all the creatures in this world is exactly the kind of thing that can feel what's underneath. It looked at the small, harmless pet and it didn't see the pet. It saw down through it. It saw the thing folded up inside. It saw the breaker of worlds, the primordial god, the ruler of the solar system, compressed and sleeping and packed away behind those blank black eyes. And it recognized, the way only an old dark thing can recognize another old dark thing, that it was standing in front of something immeasurably older and bigger and more terrible than itself. The most evil thing the demon had ever met wasn't the penguin. The penguin was just the wrapping. The demon was reading the god underneath the wrapping. That's the whole trick of the loop, and that's why it had to wait until now to land. You can't be afraid of the penguin until you know what the penguin is made of. And I find that genuinely eerie in the best way. This idea that the surface tells you nothing, and the only ones who can see the truth are the ones with the senses to feel past the surface. We spent the start of tonight laughing at the sock eater. The demon never laughed. The demon felt the room get cold. Now let me take you back into the episode itself, because once those memories start surfacing, Gunter doesn't just sit there remembering. He acts. And what he does is one of the strangest and most quietly unsettling things I've ever watched a cartoon penguin do. He builds a ritual. In the episode, with that old self leaking back up through the crack in his head, Gunter sets up this homemade, handmade little rite. He's got carved wooden cutouts, 2 of them. One of them is Abraham Lincoln, and the other is Orgelorg himself. The penguin has carved the very figures from his own buried myth. The king who ordered him struck down, and the god that he was. 2 little wooden shapes, and he's arranged them, and he's performing something with them. It's crude, it's small, it's the sort of thing that should look like a child playing. And it does not feel like a child playing at all. It feels like a thing remembering a religion that it used to be the center of. And then there are the beams of light. This is the image that gets me, the one I told you would come back. The memories are loose because the head was opened, and in the ritual, his brain is exposed. Actually exposed. And through that exposed brain, beams of light shine out, light pouring out of the opened head of a penguin in a homemade ritual between 2 little carved wooden gods. I want you to just picture that for a moment. In the quiet, the soft, round, silly creature, the most harmless shape in the world, sitting in the middle of its own strange rite with light streaming out of its uncovered mind. And the light is reaching for something. The ritual establishes contact, psychic contact, across the unimaginable dark of space. With aliens. With beings on a world called the Swampy Planet, the buried thing inside the penguin, woken by the crack in its skull, is reaching back out across the cosmos toward the stars it fell from, trying to touch what's still out there. The breaker of worlds, calling home. Let me give you the reading on that exposed brain, because I think it's the saddest and most exact thing the whole episode does. Earlier, I asked you to hold the idea that the brain was the prison, that the memories were never gone, just locked behind the bone, and that it took a crack in the wall to let the light in. Well, here it is, made literal, right there on the screen. The brain is opened, and the moment the brain is opened, the buried self can finally reach. The mind that was the cell becomes the door. Read this way, that beam of light pouring out of the exposed brain is a picture of a trapped mind straining back toward who it used to be. The prisoner finally able to call through the broken wall of its cell. The injury that started all this, the bonk that shook the memories loose, it didn't just hurt him, it opened him, and what was inside reached straight for the sky. I want to give you one more piece to set the true scale of this thing, because I don't think the penguin form lets you feel how big Orgelorg really is supposed to be. There's another moment elsewhere in the show, in the episode Gold Stars, where the Lich speaks. And the Lich, if you don't know him yet, is one of the oldest and most purely evil forces this whole story has, a thing of death and endings. And in the Lich's speech, he places Orgelorg among a particular company, among the monsters that existed before time itself. Before time, not old, not ancient, before the very idea of before. The Lich, a creature we are meant to fear down to our bones, names Orgelorg as one of those primordial things that were already there when time began. So when I tell you the penguin has a god inside it, I don't want you to picture something merely powerful. I want you to picture something that predates the clock, something from before the universe started counting. That is what got folded up and pressed into a shape that eats socks. And here is where I have to just let the tragedy land, because we've earned it now, and there's no soft way around it. The most powerful villain in the entire cosmos, the breaker of worlds, a thing from before time. A ruler of the solar system that a king and a god and a flaming sword had to band together to bring down, has spent its entire second life as a confused little pet. That's it. That's what became of all that power. It eats socks, it breaks bottles, it plinks at a keyboard, it waddles after a lonely wizard fetching potions. And the very worst part, the part that turns it from a strange fact into an actual grief, is this. It doesn't know. It has no idea. It doesn't know what it was. It doesn't know what it ruled. It doesn't know what it lost. You can lose everything you ever were, every scrap of your power and your name and your history, and if the losing also takes the memory of having lost it, then you don't even get to mourn. There's no grief for Gunter because there's no one left in there who knows there's anything to grieve. The penguin is content. The penguin is happy in its blank, soft, sock-eating way. And that contentment is the cruelest thing in the whole story. Read this way, Orgelorg's punishment was perfect. That's the word I keep landing on. Perfect. Because think about what it actually is. It isn't death. Death would have been mercy, an ending, a clean stop. This is the other thing. This is erasure plus survival. The god is not killed, it's emptied, and then it's kept alive to go on existing as the emptied thing, harmless and unaware, forever. Condemned not to die, but to be small, and to be content with being small, and to never once know that it was ever anything else. The King of Mars and his champion didn't just defeat the Breaker of Worlds. The reading the show offers is that they did something far worse than defeat it. They made it forget, and then they let it live. And if that shape sounds familiar to you tonight, if some quiet part of you is going, wait, I've heard this story already, you're right, and I think it's the whole secret heart of why this character exists at all. Because we have heard it already. We're going to spend other nights on it, but you already feel it. A vast self crushed down into a smaller, sadder, unknown one. A great mind, broken and emptied, and reduced to something that doesn't remember what it was. That's Orgulorg, the god folded into a penguin. But read it again, and that's also Simon, the kind and gentle man crushed down by the crown into the Ice King, the lonely wizard in the snow who doesn't remember who he used to be either, the penguin and the wizard. The Breaker of Worlds reduced to a beloved pet, and the good man reduced to a sad old villain. The reading I keep coming back to is that they're the same story, told twice, sitting right next to each other in the same frozen palace. Two enormous selves, both crushed small, both made to forget, both somehow still here. Daddy. And Daddy's little fatty, neither of them knowing a thing. I have to be straight with you about one more bit of caution before we move on, because I never want to sell you certainty I don't have. The timeline of all this is loose. The encounter with the comet is only ever placed as thousands of years before. A long ago, a deep past, no calendar, no fixed date. And the length of that wandering, the age the empty penguin spent drifting the Earth before the Ice King found him, the show never documents at all. So I've kept both of those vague tonight, and I've kept them vague on purpose, because the show keeps them vague and I'd rather hand you the honest fog than a number I made up to make it feel tidier than it is. But the shape of it, the myth of it, that part is solid. A god ruled the solar system, a comet came. A king sent a champion with a flaming sword. The god fell, and the earth made it small, and small it has stayed, fetching potions in the snow with the stars it fell from wheeling silently overhead. And those stars, it turns out, are not done with him, because that very same comet of change keeps its own slow appointment, and the day it comes back around is the day a long shut door finally cracks open. And then, after all those ages of waiting, the comet finally came back, and the penguin got one chance to remember what he was, while there was still a sky to reach for. So let me walk you through how that wakes up, because the show doesn't do it all at once. It does it the way it does everything with this creature, sideways, in pieces, while you're looking at something else. We're in the back half of season 6 now, the long run of episodes that close that season out, and the thing we spent the last little while learning about, the Breaker of Worlds curled up asleep under the feathers, starts to stir. Not as a monster crashing through a wall, as a penguin in a trench coat. I want you to hold on to how absurd that is, because I think it's the key to the whole thing. Here's the setup. There's an episode called Hot Diggity Doom, and the Candy Kingdom is having an election. Politics in the Candyland. And moving through the middle of all that, lurking around the edges of the frame, there's a figure in a trench coat, glasses, and gloves, going by the name Mr. X. And it's Gunter. It's the penguin. Orgulorg, awake now, or awake enough, trying to pass as a person, and the disguise is a trench coat, a pair of glasses, and some gloves pulled over the flippers. Picture that for a second. Really picture it. A short round penguin, the same soft little shape we started with hours ago, standing upright in a coat that's too big, glasses perched on a face that has no business wearing glasses, gloves on flippers that can barely hold anything, calling himself Mr. X and sliding through a kingdom's election like he belongs there. It is the single most ridiculous image of menace you could possibly draw. And it's supposed to be. The show knows exactly what it's doing. The most dangerous thing in the cosmos has woken up, has remembered enough to scheme, and the best it can manage is to put on a coat and hope nobody looks too hard. I have to be honest with you, I laughed. A penguin in a trench coat going by Mr. X is genuinely funny, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. But sit with it a beat longer and the laugh does that thing it keeps doing tonight. It catches a little. Because read this way, the disguise is the show winking at us. It's telling us something quiet and a little sad. Even fully awake, even with the ancient thing back at the wheel, the Breaker of Worlds can only operate through a body that reads as a joke. It can't be terrifying. It physically can't. It reaches for power dressed as a punchline because a punchline is the only costume it's got. The trench coat isn't just a gag. It's the ceiling on what this god can be anymore. A penguin in a coat. That's the most awake it gets. And while it's lurking through that election, the show hands us the cleanest look we ever get at what actually drives this thing. There's a philosophy attached to Orgulorg, and the way it's framed is the open door. The idea is simple and cold. Orgalorg takes any opening it finds to gain power, any door left even slightly ajar, it walks through, regardless of the cost to anyone else. That's the whole moral engine, right there. No decoration on it, see an opportunity, take it, never mind who pays. Now, stop and feel the shape of that because I think it's one of the most important things in this entire story, and I want to lay it right next to something we already know. The open door is a perfect villain philosophy. It's pure, it's clean in the way truly cold things are clean. There's no cruelty in it for cruelty's sake, no rage, no wounded pride, nothing personal at all. Just appetite plus opportunity. A tide finding the low ground. And what this suggests, the thing I can't stop turning over, is how completely it inverts the other half of this character. Because we spent ages back there sitting with the Ice King, didn't we? The loneliest man in U, a wizard who steals princesses because he doesn't understand any other way not to be alone, who pours all his clumsy foolish love into a penguin who can't even tell him why it stays. Hold those two side by side. The Ice King's whole tragedy is that he loves badly, selfishly, stupidly, but he loves. He reaches for connection and fumbles it every single time, and it costs him everything, and he keeps reaching anyway. And here, sharing a kingdom with him, sometimes sharing a frame with him, is Orgalorg, whose entire being is the exact opposite. Take, never give. Walk through every open door and never once wonder who's standing behind it. Read this way, the open door throws the Ice King's selfless, foolish, doomed tenderness into the sharpest possible relief. Two ancient broken things at the top of the world. One can't stop loving. The other was never built to. And the cruelest little detail, the one that keeps me up, is that they're sometimes the same shape. The penguin gets both. The penguin is where the clumsy love and the cold appetite both come to live, and the penguin can't feel either one. Okay, quick breath. Let me say plainly that I have to be careful with the bookkeeping here, because the research on this stretch of the show is genuinely tangled. The big finale episode, the one we're walking toward, gets listed with conflicting episode numbers and conflicting air dates depending on where you look. 2 different numbers, 2 different dates, in the summer of 2015. And I'm not going to stand here and assert a number that the sources can't agree on, so I'm just going to call it by its name, the Comet, and treat it as the close of Season 6. And we'll let the contested little details stay contested. The story doesn't need a catalog number to break your heart, it just needs the penguin and the sky. So, the Comet. Here's what happens, and I want to slow all the way down for it, because this is the part the whole video has been quietly walking toward. There's a comet coming, the Catalyst Comet, and Orgalorg, awake, hungry, remembering at last what it is and what it wanted, hijacks Princess Bubblegum's ship, takes her vessel, the one built to reach up out of the world, and points it at the comet. Because the plan, the whole ancient plan, the thing it waited eons for, is to intercept that comet and consume its essence, to swallow it, to take the catalyst into itself and become, again, the thing it was before the feathers, before the snow, before any of this. And I need you to feel the weight of that, because it's not a small want. This isn't the penguin reaching for the world the way it did with the cloning, the army of Gunters, the waddling little coup we laughed at. This is the original appetite, the real one, the one from before, finally lining itself up with the one object in all of existence that could feed it. Remember the shape we kept noticing. To consume, to expand, to rule. We saw the silhouette of it in a comedy episode about a penguin with too many friends, and I told you to hold on to it because when the real thing arrived, you wouldn't be laughing. Well, here it is. The real thing. A god in a stolen ship, climbing toward a comet, reaching for the prize it has wanted since before there was an ooh to want it from. No trench coat now. No Mr. X. Just the hunger pointed at the stars. And it gets up there. That's what gets me. It actually reaches it. The comet gets swallowed, but it doesn't get to keep it, because Finn is there. Finn, the boy, the human, the heart of this whole show, ends up being the one who stands against it. And Finn defeats Orgalorg after the comet is taken. I'm going to keep that part general, honestly, because the exact beats of how it shakes out in that space sequence are tangled up in the larger finale and a lot of other threads that aren't our story tonight. Our story is the penguin. So what matters for us, the thing I want you to carry, is that the Breaker of Worlds gets all the way to the top of everything, gets its one impossible chance after waiting longer than we can imagine, and a kid stops it. And then comes the fall. Again, because here's how it ends, and the show does it almost gently, which somehow makes it worse. After the space sequence, after the comet, after the confrontation, Orgalorg comes back down into the pull of the world, and Earth's gravity does to it exactly what it did once before, a long time ago, in a story we'll get to. The weight of the world compresses it, crushes it back down, folds the god back into the small round shape, and Orgalorg becomes Gunter again, the penguin, the flippers, the blank black stare, and the memories drain away. Sit in that with me for a moment because I don't want to rush past it. I really don't. Let the room go quiet around it. The thing got one chance. One, after what might as well be forever spent asleep inside a body that eats socks and breaks bottles, it woke up. It remembered itself. It made a plan, put on a ridiculous coat, walked through every open door it could find, stole a ship, climbed up out of the world, and reached the exact comet it had been waiting eons for. It touched the prize, and then gravity reached up, took all of it back, pressed the god down into the penguin, and emptied him out. Not a piece kept, not the comet, not the plan, not the climb. Not even, and this is the part that undoes me, the knowledge that it tried. Gunter doesn't come back down remembering a glorious failure. Gunter comes back down remembering nothing. He doesn't know he was ever up there. He doesn't know he was ever awake. He doesn't know there was a sky, or a ship, or a comet, or a self that woke up just long enough to want something and lose it. And here's why I think this second fall is so much harder to watch than the first one, and I'll flag this clearly as my reading, because it is. When this happened the first time, long ago, none of us were there. It was backstory. We heard about it after the fact, the way you hear about something that happened before you were born. But this time, we were watching. We saw it wake up. We saw it scheme in that silly coat. We saw it climb. We were right there in the instant the self switched on, and we were right there in the instant it switched off. The second compression is more tragic than the first, precisely because the audience knows exactly what's being lost in the very moment it's lost. We watched a self wake up, barely, after eons, and then we watched the universe take it away again before it could even hold what it had reached for. That's a different kind of sad. That's grief with a front row seat. I should be straight with you, the way I keep trying to be all night. Whether anything of Ordalorg's awareness actually survives that recompression, whether some buried ember of it is still in there somewhere, dimmed but not gone, that's the kind of thing fans have turned over and over. And nothing official settles it. The show implies the simplest, bleakest reading, that the memories are just lost, gone, wiped clean as the snow. I lean toward believing that, not because it's comforting, it isn't, but because I think it's the truer shape of this character. The not knowing is the whole point, the same way it's been the point since a demon flinched at him in a crowded room. But I won't pretend the door is bolted. It's the same door this show always leaves cracked open. You get to decide for yourself what, if anything, is still awake down there. And now we're back at the question that's been humming under everything tonight, and I think this stretch of the story answers a piece of it in a way that genuinely stops me. The question was how the dumbest, most harmless creature in Ooh can also be the single most evil thing a demon ever met, and what it means that he never remembers being either. Here's the piece. This is the second time the universe has had this thing in its hands, fully awake, fully itself, fully dangerous, and made a choice about what to do with it. And both times the choice was the same. Not death, not a cage, not a reckoning. The universe looked at the breaker of worlds twice now and decided both times to make it small and forgetful rather than to destroy it. And read this way, I think that's the strangest mercy in the whole show. It doesn't look like mercy. It looks like defeat, like a villain getting beaten and reset. But turn it over. The universe keeps choosing not to end this thing. It keeps choosing to forget it into harmlessness instead. Crush it down, empty it out, hand it back as a penguin who will waddle off and eat a sock and never know it once held a comet in its mouth. What this suggests, and I'll mark it plainly as my own reading, is that the verdict on Orgalord is mercy wearing the mask of defeat. The cosmos won't kill the most evil thing it's ever made. It just keeps gently, relentlessly choosing to let it forget. Twice now. And maybe that's the kindest thing that can be done with something that was never given a choice about what it is. Which leaves one last thread, the one I've been saving, because if the universe keeps choosing to forget him, there's somebody else in this story who once chose to remember, and couldn't. And that brings us to Gunter, and the name Simon forgot. So I've shown you the god sleeping inside the penguin, the comet, the breaker of worlds, the thing the size of the sky folded down into a body that eats socks. And now I have to turn you around and show you the man standing right next to it, because the saddest thing about Gunter was never the monster. It's the name. It was always the name. And to get to why, I have to take you somewhere quieter than anywhere we've been tonight. So slow down with me. Let your shoulders drop. Whatever cosmic noise we've been making, the wishing comets and the soul eaters and the hunger that wanted whole solar systems, let it fade out now, because this part of the story doesn't shout. This part of the story barely speaks above a whisper. This is the quietest, saddest room in all of Ooh, and we're going to sit in it together for a while. I'll be honest with you, This is the stretch I find hardest to talk about without my voice going a little soft. So if you feel the same thing creep up on you, that's all right. That's the right reaction. That means you're hearing it. Let's start with the love. Because before we get anywhere near the tragedy, I need you to understand how much love is actually pointed at this penguin and where it's coming from. The Ice King loves Gunter, not in a small way, not in the absent-minded way you might love a thing that happens to live in your house. He loves Gunter like a father loves a child. You've heard it already tonight, that ridiculous, tender little name, Daddy's Little Fatty. The thing he coos down at the penguin in the snow. And somewhere in those tapes, in the soft buried part of him that leaks out when he thinks nobody's watching, he tells Gunter, plainly, that he loves them. Not a joke. Not a bit. A lonely man in a cold castle saying, I love you to the one creature that never leaves. And here's the ache of it, and I want you to really feel the shape of this. That love is being poured into a vessel that can't hold it. The Ice King is giving a child's love, a parent's love, the realest thing left in him, to a creature that, as far as anyone can tell, has no way to truly receive it. He's pouring warm water into cupped hands that have no bottom. The love goes in and in and in, and nothing comes back. And he keeps pouring anyway because pouring is the only thing he has left to do. Picture how that actually looks day after day in that cold castle. The wizard talking to the penguin, telling it things, confiding in it the way lonely people confide in animals, because an animal won't argue and won't leave and won't tell you you're wrong. He tucks it in, maybe. He scolds it and forgives it in the same breath. He hands it the soft, tender name and waits, every time, some small part of him waiting, for something to come back across that gap. And every time, that flat black stare, wank, and he just absorbs the silence and loves it anyway. There's a particular kind of loneliness in loving something that can't love you back on purpose. And the Ice King lives inside that loneliness so completely he stopped noticing it's there. It's just the weather of his life, cold outside, and this one warm thing he made up, blinking at him, that he decided to call family. And read this way, that's already a small heartbreak before we even get to the big one ruined mind cradling another. Because the Ice King isn't whole either, is he? He's a broken thing loving a blank thing. Neither one of them able to really know the other. The wizard can't see the monster asleep under the feathers, and the penguin can't see the man under the crown. And they sit there in the snow loving each other across a gap neither of them even knows is there. And somehow, and this is the part that catches in my chest, somehow that feels tenderer than if they could see each other clearly. Two strangers keeping each other warm in the dark, neither one understanding why, just knowing they don't want to be alone. That's the Ice King and Gunter. That's the surface of it. But the crown changes everything, because the man under that crown has a name. And once you know the name, you can never hear Daddy's Little Fatty the same way again. His name is Simon Petrikov. And I have to tell you who Simon was, before the Blueskin, before the wizard, before any of it. Because everything in this passage hangs on him being a real person first. 1,000 years ago, near enough, before the Candy Kingdoms, when the world was still our world, and then suddenly wasn't, there was a man named Simon. He was 47 years old, not a hero, not a wizard, just a man. And the world had just ended. The mushroom war had come and gone and left everything broken and gray and poisoned, the way the end of a world tends to. And into that ruin, into that ash and silence, Simon was walking. And he found a child, a little girl, 7 years old, alone in the wreckage of the end of the world. Her name was Marceline. And Simon, this ordinary, frightened 47-year-old man with the world collapsing around him, did the one decent thing a person can do in a moment like that. He took her hand, he tried to keep her safe. He carried her through the ruins, found her food, found her things, made jokes when there was nothing left to joke about, did everything a person can do to keep one small child from being swallowed by the dark. He became, in the worst place and the worst time imaginable, something like a father to her. And think about what that means in a place like that. There's no rule that says he has to. The world's over. There's no one watching, no one to be good for, no reward at the end of it, no society left to approve of him. He could have walked past her. Plenty would have. The end of everything tends to burn the kindness out of people, leaves them scrabbling and scared and looking out only for themselves, and nobody could really have blamed a frightened old man for keeping his head down and saving his own skin. But Simon doesn't. Simon picks up the kid. Simon decides, in the ashes, with nothing left to gain, that this one small life is worth carrying. That's not a small thing. That might be the largest thing a person can do, and he does it quietly, in the dark, with the whole world gone. Just hold that picture for a second before I have to take it apart. A man and a little girl walking through the end of everything, and the man keeping the girl alive by sheer stubborn love. He'd find her little treasures in the rubble. He'd play pretend with her to keep the fear at bay. He'd put himself between her and whatever was out there in the gray. There's a warmth in that you could heat a whole life on. And the cruel thing, the thing the show is setting up even as it shows you all that tenderness, is that the warmer this gets, the worse the cold that's coming is going to feel. But Simon was already wearing the crown by then, and the crown was already eating him. You have to understand what the crown does, because we've talked about it as a thing that makes ice and steals princesses and turns a man blue, and all of that is true, but that's the surface again. What the crown really does, underneath, is erase. It eats the mind, it hollows out the self, memory by memory, name by name, and fills the empty space with cold. And Simon, walking through the ruins with this little girl he loved, was losing himself the whole time. He could feel it going. He knew, in the moments the crown let him know anything, that the man named Simon was being scraped out of his own skull a little more every day. And he held on as long as he could, for her, because if he stopped being Simon, there'd be no one left to keep her safe. And that's its own particular horror, isn't it? Separate from anything else. To feel yourself going, to know that the you doing the knowing is getting smaller, that the words are slipping, that the memories are thinning out like fog burning off, and to understand that there's a version of you coming, soon, who won't even remember to be sad about it. Most of us get to lose ourselves slowly and not notice. Simon noticed. Simon stood there at the end of the world watching himself disappear in real time, and the only thing that kept him reaching for the surface was the little girl whose hand he was holding. She was the rope. As long as he could keep her safe, he had a reason to keep being Simon, and the crown knew that. The crown went for exactly that. And here's where it happens. Here's the thing I've been walking you toward this whole time. The thing that turns the name from a joke into a wound. As the crown ate him, Simon started calling Marceline by the wrong name. He started calling her Gunter. Sit with that. Please, just sit with it for a moment, because I don't think there's anything else in this entire show that does what this does. The man is losing his mind. He's losing her. And in the place in his head where her name used to be, the name of the child he loved, the little girl he was carrying through the end of the world, the crown had already put something else. It had already moved a penguin in, the designation of a pet, sitting in the exact spot where her name belonged. He reaches for the most precious thing he has, the name of the kid he's giving up his whole self to protect, and what comes out of his mouth is Gunter. The crown had replaced the name of the child he loved with the name of a penguin, and it had done it before the penguin even existed. So now go back. Go all the way back to where we started tonight, to the very first thing I told you. The name that meant nothing. The throwaway, the silly little sound, Gunter, wank. The name of a pet that we were told carried no weight at all. Just a noise a wizard makes at his bird. I told you it meant nothing. The show told you it meant nothing. And it was a lie, the gentlest, cruelest lie the show ever told you. Because the name is not nothing. The name is a scar. The name is the single clearest piece of evidence in the whole series of exactly what the crown took. Every time the Ice King says Gunter, every single time, he is saying the word that overwrote a little girl named Marceline in the mind of a man who would have died for her. The name is the wound the crown left, worn on the outside, said out loud 100 times as a joke for years, and none of us knew. If these are the threads you love finding too, the kind of show buries so quietly you could watch it twice and miss them, sticking around and subscribing genuinely does help me keep pulling them loose, and I'm thankful for every one of you who does. Okay, stay in the quiet with me. We're not done, because look at what we're actually holding now, when you put the two halves of tonight side by side. And I'll say plainly that this next part is me reading the show, drawing the line myself, not something anyone stamped official. But I don't think I'm wrong about it. We have Orgolorg, a god, a breaker of worlds, something vast and ancient and hungry, crushed down by the gravity of the earth into a soft little body and made to forget it was ever anything at all. A whole cosmic self, compressed to nothing, its memory wiped clean. And we have Simon, a whole human self, a kind man, a father, compressed down by a magic crown into something cold and blue and broken. His memory scraped away, his very name pulled out of him. Do you see it? They're the same story. They're the exact same story, told twice in two completely different registers, and the show just quietly lays them next to each other and trusts you to feel the rhyme. A whole self, crushed small, and made to forget. One crushed by gravity, one crushed by a crown, one a god, one a man, both hollowed out, both wandering around with the truth of themselves locked away somewhere they can't reach. And what sits at the exact center of both of those stories? What's the single object both compressions run straight through? The penguin. Gunter sits dead in the middle of both. He is the body the god was crushed into, and he is the name the man was crushed into. The forgetting of Ordalorg and the forgetting of Simon meet in one small round creature blinking in the snow. And read this way, that's what Gunter really is. Underneath the gags and the sock eating and the bottle breaking, he's a living symbol of forgetting. He's what's left when something enormous gets pressed down small and loses the thread of what it used to be. He's the shape that grief takes in this show. Twice over, the same erasure that compressed a god is the erasure that compressed a man, and the penguin is the seam where the two of them touch. I need a breath after that one, honestly. That's a lot to hold at 2 in the morning. Take one with me, and I should be fair, because I always want to be straight with you. Whether the Ice King's love for Gunter is real fatherly love, or partly just the crown's corruption talking, an echo of the man calling Marceline by that name, leaking forward into the penguin, the show doesn't actually settle that. Fans have gone back and forth on it. Maybe the love is genuine and clean. Maybe it's a ghost of Simon's love for Marceline, misfiled by a broken mind onto a creature that happens to wear the name. Nothing official tells you which. I think it might be both at once. And I think the show wants it to be both at once, because both at once is sadder and truer than either one alone. But I promised you we'd end this part somewhere, and there is one more thing, and it's the closest thing to light I can offer you in all this dark. So let me give it to you gently. At the very end of the show, in the last great battle, everything that's been crushed gets a chance to come back. There's a place inside the realm of a creature called Golb, where the rules bend, where things get unmade and remade. And in there, the Ice King changes. The blue drains out of him, the wildness leaves his eyes. The crown's curse lifts, just for a while, and standing where the Ice King was standing is a man. A real man. Simon Petrikov found again after 1,000 years of being scraped away. The self that the crown ate is suddenly, impossibly back, pulled up out of the deep snow at last. And I want you to feel how enormous that is, because we've spent so long with the wizard that it's easy to forget there was ever anybody else in there. For 1,000 years, there's been this blue figure stealing princesses and freezing things and saying wank at a penguin. And the whole time, underneath, buried so deep that even he didn't know, there was Simon, the man who carried a little girl through the apocalypse. And now, for the first time in 10 centuries, he gets to stand up in his own body, with his own face, with his own name in his own mouth, and just be himself again. After everything, after all of it, the thing that got crushed didn't stay crushed. It was down there the whole time, waiting, and somebody finally reached in and pulled it up. And it costs something, the way these things always do. It happens because Betty, the woman who loved Simon, the woman who never stopped trying to save him, takes the crown's own wishing power and wishes, with everything she has, to protect him, to keep him safe. The same impossible love Simon once carried a little girl through the apocalypse with, turned back around and aimed at him. And the crown, asked to grant that wish, comes apart into what it always was underneath, a raw thing made of wishing, and Betty is fused into Golb in the granting of it. She pours herself out completely so that the man can come back. Someone loved him enough to wish him whole, and paid for the wish with herself. And there's a terrible symmetry in that I can't stop turning over. Simon saved a child by holding on. Betty saved Simon by letting go, by spending her whole self in a single wish. The love just keeps getting handed down the line, parent to child, woman to man, each one giving up something enormous so the next one gets to keep existing. The crown spent 1,000 years taking, and in the end, the only thing strong enough to undo what it took was somebody willing to give everything in one breath. Not a spell, not a weapon. Just love, aimed hard enough to bend the rules of the world. That's the price of pulling a buried self back into the light, and somebody was willing to pay it. So a self can return. That's the thing I want to leave in your hands here, and I'll mark it clearly as my reading, my hope, not a fact the show hands you. A whole person, crushed down to nothing, erased, forgotten, lost for 1,000 years, can come back if somebody loves them enough to wish it so. Simon got that. Simon got the door opened and the curse lifted and his own name returned to him. And that's exactly the thing the penguin is denied, because nobody wishes Gunter whole. There's no Betty for the penguin. The god stays crushed, the body stays a body. Whatever was compressed into Gunter, whatever vast forgotten thing, never gets its moment in Golb's belly, never gets pulled up out of the snow, never gets to remember. Simon comes back. Gunter doesn't. The man is found, and the thing he used to call Gunter, the name he reached for in his ruin, is still out there somewhere, soft and blank and unaware, carrying a forgetting that nobody ever lifts. That contrast is the whole tragedy in miniature. One forgetting gets undone by love, the other just goes on. And that gap between the self that came back and the self that never will is exactly where we have to go next. Because to understand what Gunter actually is and isn't, we have to look at the strangest part of his whole story: the egg, the bird woman, and the ice thing he finally became. There's one last layer underneath the god and the penguin and the pet, and it's the strangest one of all, because it asks whether Gunter was ever really a penguin, or even really a he at all. We've spent this whole long night treating that as settled. The penguin, the little round body, the flippers, the waddle, the blank black stare. We've called him because everyone in the show calls him because it's the natural thing to reach for. But I want to pull on that thread now, gently in the dark, because when you follow it, the floor sort of drops away beneath you. Underneath the comet eater, underneath the loyal pet, underneath the most evil thing a demon ever flinched at, there's a question the show keeps circling and refuses to ever land on. What is this thing actually shaped like, when nobody's drawing it as a penguin? And the honest answer is that we don't know, and I've come to think we're not supposed to. So let me go into the dreamlike stuff now, the material that feels less like plot and more like something you'd half remember from a fever. Because the show drops two clues into this story that quietly unmake the penguin. And they're easy to miss, and once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. The first one is the egg. I told you ages ago that I'd come back to the egg, and here we are. Early on, in an episode called The Chamber of Frozen Blades, this supposed he, this little fellow we keep calling a boy penguin, lays an egg. Just lays it the way penguins do, no fanfare. Almost a throwaway moment. And you might shrug and think, well, sure, penguins lay eggs, that's the joke. But hold on, stay with what actually comes out of it. Because what hatches is not a penguin. What hatches is described as a small floating pink kitten. A kitten, pink, floating, out of a penguin's egg. I have to stop and just laugh at that for a second because it is so deeply, perfectly Adventure Time. Of course the penguin's egg produces a floating pink kitten. Of course it does. Nothing in this kingdom obeys the rules it pretends to obey. But once the laugh settles, look at what that little gag has quietly done to the foundation of everything we thought we knew. It's told us the body is not a reliable fact. A creature we've been reading as a male penguin lays an egg, which already complicates the he, and then the egg produces something that isn't even the same kind of animal. The penguin doesn't breed true. The penguin produces a kitten. And read this way, that's the show whispering to us, early and sideways, long before any of the cosmic stuff, that the shape called Gunter is not a stable thing. It's not an animal with a biology you can chart. It's a costume that happens to lay eggs, and the eggs hatch into whatever the dream feels like that day. That's clue 1. Here's clue 2. And clue 2 is where it stops being funny and starts being genuinely eerie. There's an episode called Hoots, and in it, we get to look for just a moment at what Gunter is underneath when the penguin skin comes off in a dream. And what we find there is not a penguin and not a kraken god writhing with tentacles either. What we find is a woman, a tall gray figure, a female form the show calls the bird woman. Gunter, in the dream logic of that episode, manifests as this tall gray female presence, looming, calm, and entirely unlike the little waddling body we know. And she comes with a premonition attached to her, a vision, dark and quiet, of transforming the Candy Kingdom into a melted state. Picture that. All that bright, bouncing, sugar-colored world, the Gumball Guardians and the Candy People in the castle, slumping and running and going soft, melting down into a slow, bright ruin, and the figure standing at the center of that vision, the buried self stepping forward out of the penguin to deliver it, isn't a him at all. It's tall, it's gray, it's female, it's vast, and it's wrong. Let me sit in that image, because it's one of the strangest in the whole series, and the show just sets it down and walks away from it without explaining a thing. The little penguin you'd swear was a harmless background gag opens up, in a dream, into a towering gray woman holding a prophecy of everything melting. And nobody in the episode stops to underline it. There's no character pointing at the screen going, "Do you understand what you just saw?" It's offered the way this show offers all its deepest things, in passing, while you're looking at something else, the way part of you only registers a sound in the next room after it's already stopped. So now put the two clues side by side. The egg, which produces a kitten, not a penguin, and the bird woman, tall and gray and female, who is what Gunter looks like from the inside of a dream. And here's the interpretation I keep landing on, and I'll mark it clearly as mine. Because the show would never say it this plainly. The egg and the bird woman are telling us together that the penguin form was always a costume. Whatever Gunter is, down at the very bottom, it was never really a penguin and it was never really a he. Those are shells. The penguin is a shell, the he is a shell, the way Orgolorg was a kind of shell. The way even the loyal little pet was a shell. The thing inside is wearing all of them, one over another, like coats, and not one of them is the truth. We keep reaching for a noun, a boy, a penguin, a god, and the show keeps gently taking the noun out of our hands. Now, I want to be careful and honest here, the way I've tried to be all night, because this is exactly the kind of place where it'd be easy to overreach. So let me hold the gender thing the way the show actually holds it, which is to say, unresolved on purpose. Most of the time, characters use he and him for Gunter. That's the default. That's what you'll hear in episode after episode, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise or scrub it out. But then there's the egg, and then there's the bird woman, and the usage shifts and slides depending on the moment and the dream. And when you lay all of that together, what you get isn't a contradiction the writers forgot to fix. What you get is a deliberate refusal. The show is choosing not to settle this. It's choosing to leave the gender and the deepest identity of this creature deliberately ambiguous. And I think the right thing to do, the only honest thing, is to let it stay that way rather than march in and decide it for them. So I'll say it straight. The pronouns for this thing, whether you call it Gunter or Orgolorg or the bird woman, are inconsistent across the series by design, not by accident, by design. And whether the bird woman is a distinct, genuinely gendered self living down inside the penguin, or just a symbolic shape the dream reached for to show us something true, that's something fans have turned over and over, and nothing official confirms either reading. I'm not going to pick a side and sell it to you at 2 in the morning as a fact. I'm going to leave the door cracked the way this show always leaves it cracked, and let the ambiguity be the answer, because I genuinely think the ambiguity is the answer. The point isn't what's underneath, the point is that you can never quite reach it. Okay. Deep breath, because now we come to the ending. The real one, the place all of this has been waddling toward, and it's so much stranger and so much sweeter than you could possibly guess from where we started. We're at the series finale now. Come along with me, the very end of Adventure Time. And by this point, a lot has happened to the man we've been calling the Ice King, the wizard who loved this penguin so badly and so well. The short version, the part our story needs, is that Simon, the human being who was buried under the crown for 1,000 years, finally comes back. Simon gets to be human again. The crown comes off the man, and the crown itself, that battered, ancient, terrible object, gets restored to what it really is underneath all the madness it caused. It goes back to being a wishing crown, a thing that grants the deepest wish of whoever puts it on. And then, in the quiet after all that enormous emotion, after the war and the reunion and Simon walking out of his own curse a person again, the penguin waddles over. Gunter, our Gunter, the little round body, the blank stare, the creature who eats socks and breaks bottles and once held a comet in its mouth and forgot. And Gunter puts on the crown. And Gunter makes a wish. The wish is to be like the Ice King. And the crown grants it. The penguin transforms, right there, swelling and changing, and becomes a new being the show simply calls the Ice Thing. Not the Ice King. The Ice Thing, a penguin's wish granted, taking the shape of the man who raised it. I need you to feel how much is folded into that one small act, because the show plants it right on top of something we learned much earlier, in a flashback episode called Evergreen. And the two of them together form what I honestly think is the thesis of the entire series, said in a single image. So let me lay the other half down next to it. Way back in Evergreen, we saw the deep origin of the crown. And there was a creature there too. A little dinosaur, a mistreated servant named Gunter, spelled with an H, that one, but it's the same root, the same idea, the show rhyming across thousands of years. On purpose. And that little dinosaur Gunter served a cruel, cold ice wizard called Urgence Evergreen, the original maker of the crown. And Gunter the dinosaur was treated terribly, abused, belittled. And when that little dinosaur got near the crown and wished to be like his master, the wish came true and turned him into a monster. An insane, raving caricature of the wizard. Because the wish doesn't grant who the master actually was. The wish grants who the master was to you. And to Gunter the dinosaur, the master was cruelty. So the wish made cruelty. It made a broken, screaming thing. Now come back across all those centuries to our penguin, putting on the same crown, making the same wish. Be like the Ice King. And here's the part that stops me cold every single time. Gunter's wish doesn't make a monster. Gunter's wish makes something gentler, Something truer, a more accurate Ice King replica, not a raving parody. And the reason, the only reason, is what the Ice King was to Gunter. Because for all his foolishness, for all his clumsy princess-stealing madness, the Ice King showed this penguin real, paternal compassion. He loved it. Badly, stupidly, completely, but truly. Daddy's little fatty. He fed it and scolded it and kept it close and poured all his lonely tenderness into a creature that couldn't say thank you. And so when that creature wished to be like him, the wish had love in it. And love is what came out. So look at the two of them side by side. Same crown, same wish. Two opposite results. Gunter the dinosaur abused, wished, and became a monster. Gunter the penguin loved, wished, and became a gentle echo. And the interpretation I'll plant my whole heart on while marking it clearly as my reading is that this is the thesis of the entire show compressed into one image. The cruelty or the kindness you receive decides the shape you take. That's it. That's the whole thing Adventure Time has been quietly saying for hours. You are not born your shape. You are made it by how you're held. One creature was held with cruelty and turned into a horror. The other was held with love and turned into something kind. Same magic, same wish. The only variable was what was poured in first. And I have to just stop and breathe there for a second because that's beautiful. And it caught me sideways when I put it together. The most evil thing a demon ever met, the Breaker of Worlds, gets to the end of its long, strange story, and the thing that decides what it finally becomes isn't its ancient nature at all. It's a lonely wizard who couldn't stop loving it. That's the variable. That's the whole answer to who this thing turns into. Not the comet, not the demon, the love. Okay, snap back, because the ending isn't even done being strange yet, and the next turn is so gentle and so silly that it loops the whole night right back to where we started. Because what does the ice thing do now that it exists? Does it go conquer something? Does it reach for a comet? No, the ice thing gets married. There's a jewel set in the ice thing's face, and at some point that jewel comes loose and falls, and it lands in a donut. And the donut gets used as an engagement ring. And with that, the ice thing is engaged to Turtle Princess. A jewel, a donut, a turtle. And the ice thing marries her and becomes the ruler of a little place the show calls the Ice Thingdom. That's the ending. The thing that was once going to eat the solar system settles down with Turtle Princess over a donut and rules a tiny frozen kingdom with a goofy name. And read this way, I think that's the show's final joke and its final mercy, both at once. Think about the journey, a breaker of worlds, a god that waited eons under the ice to consume a comet and rule everything. And it ends not by conquering the cosmos, but by marrying a turtle with a donut for a ring. That's funny. It's genuinely warmly funny. But it's also the kindest thing the show could possibly have done. Because after everything, after the crushing and the forgetting and the appetite and the loss, the cosmos finally just lets this thing be small, lets it be content. A god, at long last, allowed to stop reaching and to just sit down somewhere quiet and be happy. That's mercy. The whole night has been the universe choosing over and over to make this thing small instead of destroying it, and here, at the very end, the smallness finally turns into peace instead of loss. I wish I could stop there. I almost want to, but the show being this show won't quite let the happy ending stay clean, and I'd be lying to you if I pretended it did. Because there's one more glimpse, much further on. In a strange episode called Grapel's 1000 Plus, we jump more than 1,000 years into the future, long past everything, into the ruins of what used to be the Ice Kingdom. And the ice thing is still there, but it's not a gentle married ruler anymore. 1,000 years on, the ice thing has become a deranged flying ice creature, haunting the wreckage, tangled up in some conflict with a figure called Gibbon and a place called the Pup Kingdom. All of it over a missing jewel. A jewel, again. After 1,000 years, this thing is still circling a lost jewel in a ruin, raving, alone. And I'll mark this as my reading, but I think that far future shadow is the show refusing, even now, to hand us a clean ending. Because read this way, the degeneration in Grable's 1000 Plus is saying the quiet hard thing it's been saying all night, that the cycle of forgetting and decaying never fully stops. Not even for something this strange. Not even after love. The gentle ending was real, but it wasn't permanent, because nothing here is permanent. Give it 1,000 years and even the kind shape slumps back into something lost and deranged and circling a jewel it can't find. Whether that's literal devolution, the body itself decaying, or whether it's psychological, the mind degenerating the way Simons once did under the crown. Fans have argued both, and nothing official tells us which. Whether a being this cosmic can ever truly finally change, or only ever loops. That's unconfirmed too, and I'll leave it that way. The door stays cracked. It always does. So let me start gathering all of this up now. All of it, the whole night, because we've finally seen the entire shape and I want to hold it in one hand before we put it down. Look at everything this one little creature has been. A god, the breaker of worlds that wanted to eat a comet and rule the stars. A penguin, soft and round and waddling, eating socks in the snow. A pet, loyal and silly, fetching potions for a lonely wizard. A man's whole heart, the one thing the Ice King poured his love into. An egg that hatched a floating pink kitten and broke the rules of its own body. A bird woman, tall and gray and female, holding a vision of everything melting. And an ice thing, married over a donut, ruling a tiny kingdom, decaying 1,000 years on in a ruin. All of that is one figure. One creature wearing god and penguin and pet and man and egg and woman and ice thing like coats stacked one over another. And never, not once, knowing it wore any of them. And that brings us right back to the demon, and to the question that's been humming under this whole night. A demon looked at this creature and recoiled, and named the thing inside it the most evil it had ever encountered. And I think, holding everything now, the demon was right and also completely blind. Right, because the thing inside Gunter genuinely was that. A cosmic appetite, a breaker of worlds, the most evil thing in the cosmos, curled up asleep under the feathers. But blind, because what that thing actually became was never decided by the evil in it at all. It was decided every single time, by whoever was holding it. And at the end, the thing that was held with cruelty in another life became a monster. And this one, held with foolish, clumsy, relentless love by a lonely man in the snow, became something gentle enough to marry a turtle. The evil was real, and it didn't get the final say. Who held it did. And once you've seen that the most evil thing a demon ever met spent its whole existence being shaped entirely by the love or cruelty around it, there's really only one thing left to do with all of it, which is to sit back and ask quietly, what a story like this is actually trying to tell us about ourselves. So let me take you back to where we started. All the way back, a small fat penguin standing in the snow of the Ice Kingdom, blinking up at a lonely wizard who calls him Daddy's little fatty. That was the picture I gave you hours ago, and back then it was just a picture. A sweet little nothing. A background gag in a candy-colored world. Look at him now. Same snow, same blank black stare, same soft round-shaped waddling after the same foolish broken king. But you can't see him the way you did at the start anymore, can you? Because now you know what's underneath. The breaker of worlds. The comet he reached for and held for one impossible second. The gravity that crushed a god down into feathers twice. The crown that crushed a man down out of his own name. Simon, the name that got lost in the ice. The egg the bird woman kept. The turtle. The donut. All of it, the whole tangled, buried weight of it, sleeping quietly behind two little eyes that don't know any of it is there. So here's the question that's been humming under this entire night. One last time, how can the dumbest, most harmless creature in all of Ooh, a penguin that eats socks and breaks bottles, also be the single most evil thing a demon has ever met? And what does it mean that he never once remembers being either? And I think, sitting here in the quiet with you, I finally want to answer it. The demon was telling the truth. That's the part people want to wave away, and you shouldn't. The most evil thing in the cosmos really was sleeping inside that penguin. That terror was real. The demon flinched for a reason. But here's what the whole night has been building toward, and I'll say it as softly as I can. Evil and innocence were never decided by what he is. They were decided by who held him. The exact same creature, unchanged, is a horror in the hands of a frightened demon, and a daddy's little fatty in the hands of a lonely king. Nothing about the penguin moved. Only the hands around him did. And this terrible thing, this breaker of worlds, was held at the very end of everything with a clumsy, foolish, enormous love it could not even understand. A love it could never return. A love it will never ever remember receiving. And maybe that's the kindest thing the universe can do with a thing like this. Not destroy it, not cage it, not make it pay. Just make it small, make it forget, and let someone love it anyway. So that's the thought I want to leave in your hands tonight, as your eyes get heavy. Not the comet, not the demon, just the idea that the most monstrous thing imaginable got to spend its last chapter as somebody's silly little penguin, warm and harmless, and held. That somewhere under all that snow, the worst thing that ever was gets to be safe, gets to be loved, gets to forget. Thank you for staying up with me, truly. For following a penguin all the way down from the snow to the stars and back into the snow again, and for sitting in the sad parts instead of skipping past them. It means more than you know that you spent your quiet hours here. If nights like this one help you drift off, the little subscribe button is what keeps them coming, soft and slow, whenever you need somewhere gentle to land. No rush, it'll be here. For now, just close your eyes There he is, the fat penguin, asleep in the snow, and inside him, hushed and harmless at last, a whole dead universe, dreaming quietly. Good night.